r/AskReddit, what is a scandal that should have been far bigger news than it was? She's in a better place. Or several. Executives from financial institutions in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis giving each other fat checks with the bailout money instead of getting jail time. Same was done with PPP loans that were forgiven. They were intended to be used for keeping people employed, instead a lot of orgs used it for exec bonuses and comp. Panama Papers. My sketchy boss from my first job out of college was named in the Panama Papers. We all had a good laugh about it. Two ultra scientists getting caught, told to stop by Supreme Court, then not stopping, getting caught a second time, and never getting in actual trouble for the unethical experiments done to civilians without their knowledge, nor compensation given to their subjects for the effects of the experiments. For all we know, they never stopped and still are active today. Yeah, there's no way they would have completely stopped doing that stuff. They just hide it better. Several years ago there was the LIBOR scandal where banks were illegally manipulating interest rates. It was sort of complicated and not very sexy, so no one was interested. The problem is the LIBOR is an institutionalized market manipulation. What they did was against regulations, but the punishment was being barred from doing it again. It didn't garner public interest, but the banks were fined and regulatory action was taken. I certainly wouldn't say they got away with anything. Coal ash in Lake Norman area of NC. Duke Energy essentially caused cancer across the areas here. Namely thyroid. Every single year when you look at stock trade history for US politicians and notice they average like 80% return on their investments. Nothing to see there, I'm sure. Our politicians would shit themselves if we ever stopped fighting with each other about sides and worked together. Much easier to control us if we are fighting about transgender people or some other trivial bullshit instead of some real bullshit that's going on unspoken about. Stock trading as congressional members. As someone who works for a financial service firm, where my investment options are so limited it's not really worth bothering, it annoys the hell out of me that politicians aren't held to the same standards in the name of conflict of interest. 215 bodies found behind a county jail in Mississippi. In unmarked grave. County claimed they had no loved ones, but some were actually missing persons that police never notified the families of. Wonder why. This is current news though, isn't it? I just read an article yesterday about an attorney demanding a probe into the bodies being buried. All the people that got millions in COVID relief money. Tom Brady, MT Green, etc. To be fair, PPP fraud is being prosecuted. Maybe not well enough. Facts. People have everything to say about student loan forgiveness, but had nothing to say about PPP loans going to Tom Brady and Diddy. My wife got thyroid cancer as well as many other people we know. Duke has continued to avoid unreal implications. Chuck Grassley initiative to audit some megachurches was swiped under the carpet. I would love to see some journalists investigating it. Link. Vince McMahon being a total perv. Instead, he sells the company and now pulling a Scrooge McDuck. The whole Attitude Era was basically the writing on the wall for this. This isn't news for anyone who watches wrestling. After WCW merged into WWE, he owned the entire viable professional industry. It's only now that there is once again a viable alternative to make a living in that he's being called out on it. Jared Kushner getting $2 billion after leaving the White House from Saudi Arabia for reasons. This is lumped in with the other vile shit that came from the Trump administration. Corruption on a whole other level and right out in the open. I'm not an expert on it, but I think the seed wars that are fucking farmers over by big companies is pretty bad. Putting farmers out of business and hiking up the price of the only seeds people are allowed to miss. All the ones that slipped by while people were paying attention to meaningless shit. My favorite example from personal experience is when the governor of NC suddenly got really concerned about where everyone was going to the bathroom instead of taking care of the massive toxic waste spill caused by the negligence of a company he worked for prior to his political career. For folks' clarity, this is referring to former NC Governor Pat McCrory, not current Governor Roy Cooper. The conduct of NFL players. For example, Tyreek Hill beat his kid and ex, with no real consequence. Ray Rice got kicked out of the league, but the Baltimore Ravens still had Ray Rice Day. The guy is on video knocking his girlfriend unconscious. Big Ben has sexually assaulted multiple people. This is not acceptable. I recently listened to a podcast about the coal ash affecting low-income communities in Baltimore and how a group of high school kids is trying to prove that it's causing a bunch of health issues in their neighborhoods. The coal ash in the story is coming from CSX trains transporting coal that pass through these neighborhoods regularly. I used to be a huge football fan. The endless list of players, coaches, and staff doing terrible things with no consequences turned me away from it. I haven't watched pro ball in years and have mostly stopped watching college too. Hillsborough disaster. The corruption was absolutely scandalous and went on for decades. Honorable mention for deep cut barracks while I'm here as well. It's really depressing that we all collectively agree Epstein was murdered to cover up the fact that way too many of our leaders are sex predators, and absolutely nothing came about it. And GT, absolutely nothing came about it. That's not true. Ghislaine Maxwell went to prison for trafficking children to checks notes. No one. Iran-Contra was big news at the time, but it's been essentially buried and forgotten today. A massive expose of the US government sending money to terrorists quickly degenerated into an Oliver North personality cult. That scandal, and its media coverage, was a huge eye-opener for young me regarding the phoniness of conservatism in America. I honestly only know about it because of American Dad. On the 80s there was Cold War drama. All the government surveillance that Edward Snowden reported. In Kansas City, there was a pharmacist named Robert Courtney, Link, who became a millionaire by intentionally diluting the doses of chemotherapy and cancer drugs. He was arrested in August of 2001 and it was a huge scandal, with thousands of patients affected. For about a month. Then 9/11 happened and his story was buried. He was sentenced to 30 years and is serving time in a federal prison right now. I mean, he's in prison. What more is there to talk about? Disney and Francis Ford Coppola hired Victor Salva, Jeepers Creepers creator, after his very short prison sentence for being a predator. The members of Congress who made fat bank in stocks with prior knowledge of COVID. It was in the news cycle for a day or two and seemed to have disappeared. I remember seeing the movie he shot where he assaulted the child and wondering why the camera held on a child in tidy whiteies for 5 minutes straight. It was horrifying finding out after the fact that Salva did, in fact, assault that child while shooting the movie. No weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And the reasons why we thought there were. Talk to SOCOM guys. They found all sorts of WMD, only it was a bunch of props designed to make the Iranians think they had WMD. McDonald's monopoly scandal. There's a reason it wasn't, Link. Maybe you've heard of it, Link. And GT, although the arrests were made almost 20 years ago, the story was pushed off the national front pages because of the 9/11 attacks. There was a HBO miniseries that brought it back into the news. Did you see the McMillions documentary, 6-episode or so series? Very entertaining and informative. Roger Stone is apparently on tape telling a cop to assassinate Democrat members of Congress, and I'm hardly seeing a peep about it on the mainstream media sites. Maybe too new of a story and they're getting all the facts? Seems like it should be a bigger deal though. Brian Kelly, head coach for LSU football, killed a kid while he was at Notre Dame, and even a lot of non-casual college football fans are unaware of this. Ohio chemical train crash. Honestly, every time a congressperson ends up a multi-millionaire should be bigger news. These fucks are gaming the system and everybody should be outraged by it. Lahaina fire. The Epstein scandal should have been. Still should be. Seems like we'll never know who was all involved. They just spoon-feed us a little info at a time, but never enough to create the outrage it should, then no one cares after a few weeks. Every single person involved should be hunted down and killed. And GT, every single person involved should be hunted down and killed. Whoa. I am sure some people on the list were involved with some of the shit Epstein was involved with, but I doubt all of them were. Jared Kushner's $2 billion from the Saudis. The financial aid scandal at Howard University in 2018 involving 6 employees with the misappropriation of over $1 million in funds. A former Olympic skier fell down the stairs in Manhattan. She was cremated but her heavy casket was buried on a golf course. Iran-Contra should have put a bunch more people in jail. A woman ended up drowning to death because of former Senator Ted Kennedy. Mary Jo Kopechne. By saying a woman it doesn't really do her justice. You know. She was a person with a name and a family. Panama Papers. Scientology leader David Miscavige's wife has been missing since 2007. And the harassment Leah Remini has received for talking about it? Where's Shelley? Hello everyone. Thanks for sticking to the end of this video. I really appreciate it. I just wanted to humbly ask you to subscribe to the channel. According to my statistics, 100% of my viewers in the past 28 days are not subscribed. I have always wanted this channel to reach 1,000 subscribers, and if you want to support and be a part of that, subscribe. It's free and it's an awesome way to support the channel. Thanks again, Reddit glitch out.